How many of you have used Prezi? So you're the only one. That's wonderful.
What is it?
How confident are you with using Prezi? Have you set up Prezis?
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's like riding a bicycle. But you've used it for presentation?
Yeah. Back in high school.
Back in high school. Okay. Well, welcome to college where we're striving to catch up with your high school. So you've read this. I'm going to look on what I'm not sure why it is. The idea is, basically, the short version of this assignment is, in class, we look at architecture and we speculate on the larger forces that are operating through that architecture and helps us explain it so we understand what the architecture is doing, how it does it, etc. And so we're going to look at that as we did in class today. And then, while you're sitting in class taking notes feverishly and thinking in an active way, because you know you're going to have to do this assignment every week. So that means when you're sitting there, you say, well, sure, he's telling a nice story, beautiful pictures, whatever, but how am I going to do something? I've got to show up next Wednesday and make a presentation. Holy shit, right? And that's the whole point, is you sit in the classroom and it's not passive. It's like, I got to do something. And I got to do it every week, like clockwork. And I don't have all the time in the world. Maybe you do. But I'm assuming you don't have all the time in the world. So when you're sitting in the lecture hall, not a bad idea to say, oh my God, what am I going to do for the assignment for next Wednesday? And when is the first one due? Next Wednesday. So everyone is paying attention now, right? So now, okay, we went over all this stuff in class. There's the architecture, there's the actual evidence of the building here, and then there's this operation of larger forces. And how do you show something that demonstrates how the forces are operating through the architecture, like we did with the lecture hall, etc. So now you try to see how it's working in the lecture. There are 4 primary examples. You're not going to do one of the 4 primary examples. You're going to do either one of the secondary examples that just flew by, like the La Quintana Library Park in Medellin, that's eligible. You can do one of the secondary examples. The escalator, you can do that. But before you do that, you should go to the textbook. And I don't have mine with me. You go to the textbook, and in the syllabus you'll see, thank you. You'll see that for this week, I've identified in a highly fragmented manner which sections of this book might be admissible evidence in a court of your section meeting. What might provide evidence that would be useful for you to work with. So, should you be reading, like if you look down at Lecture 16, Visual Regimes, should you be reading these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts of the book? Every word of it? My answer is maybe. If you have all the time in the world, please read all of it. But probably you should look at it and engage it in a very aggressive, opportunistic, and intelligent manner. Give yourself a chunk of time, limit it, say, okay, I've got this amount of time. I'm shopping for a site that I can analyze and present in class. And so you look at these sections of the textbook, and you might have a highlighter pen or a Sharpie or My copy of this book is tattered and dog-eared and with post-it notes all over the place, and yours should too, because you should be using this as a tool. You don't look at the words and, in order. You work it. This is like the internet, but it's curated. It's better than the internet. It's been curated. These buildings are important, and the people who curated know what they're doing. Let's build on this. This is pre-selected. Okay, so I'm going to go in. I'm you. I'm going to look at my lecture notes. I'm going to be thinking about this assignment all the way through the lecture. I'm going to look at my lecture notes and see what I wrote down, what I sketched, what I diagrammed. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go in hard. I'm going to go in fast, and I'm going to look at and say, that's it. This is something I can work with, or there's nothing in here I can work with. Forget the book. So either you find something in the secondary examples in the lecture, something in the book, or something from the world. And I didn't mention this, but the world is number one. The world is your teacher. The world is our teacher, not me. So you look wherever you can, find an example that it seems like it offers meat. It offers something substantive that is worthy of you spending your time digging into and sharing with your classmates. So, what kind of thing works? I'm just going to pick one at random. Well, this is one I've... So here's a picture. The topic of this example is the impact of the automobile on the world. So you notice that I can move around. I'm not editing at the present moment. I'm just viewing something passively. This is in presentation mode. And I can go up here. It's loaded because we have a fast internet. We have no sound. But the student is saying, here in, where is it, Rochester, Syracuse? Here we are, and
created walls through the city, dividing it. This cut ties between neighborhoods, causing people to move outside into suburbia, compounding the need to drive. This trend, put forth during urban renewal, created the opposite effect of what was trying to be achieved and has ruined a long-standing way of life in the urban environment.
okay, very opinionated. I don't know if we want to get that opinionated. But what we do want to do is we want to start with some type of physical evidence of a place. And just so we don't... This goes from 1 to 2, right? Okay, I just want to paste this. So we start with some physical evidence of a place. There's architecture, there's urban form, and this has turned out, I didn't know, well, I started doing this 10 years ago or so. We didn't know what we were doing. We started using just Google Earth and doing satellite views. But satellite views, it's just patterns on the landscape. And then we started doing perspectives like street views, where it's more familiar. This is the experience we have in real life. And we're here on the MIT campus, and we see Killian Court. We see the dome. We see the columns. Wow. Okay. The Killian Court view gives you an architectural human-scale experience, but it doesn't say anything about the larger system of the campus, or the city, or the world. The satellite view gives you the pattern of urban form of architecture, but it doesn't give you the experience. We're up in space, outer space. It turns out the bird's eye view is the sweet spot, because in the foreground you get architectural human scale experience. Humans have this magical capacity to project ourselves into space, and it's as if we're there. We know we have this ability to feel what it's like to be in this space. How does it feel to be in this space?
It feels very open.
Yeah. Do you like it or you don't like it? How are you feeling?
Don't like it.
Don't like it. Why not?
Cars everywhere.
Now, how do you know that that wouldn't be pleasant?
Because I've been in it.
We have all been in this space. We've all spent more time in this space than we would ever want to, even though we've never been to Syracuse. I can't remember. Syracuse or Rochester? Rochester. Never been there, but I've been here, if you know what I mean. So we have this ability, because of memory, we project ourselves into space. We know what it's like. In the foreground, we get the human scale experience of architecture, but we also get the benefit of the satellite view because we see suburbs, and that's what this student has taken advantage of. We see the impact of automobile, both the deterioration of the urban environment downtown and the sprawl that is the counterpart to that off in the distance. And so that juxtaposition turns out to be extremely valuable. Similarly, the view of Killian Court, if you take it up a few dozen feet, all of a sudden you still have the experience of Killian Court. Oh, great place to have class when the weather gets better. But you also get either the Charles River in Boston on the other side, or this whole creative economy thing, gentrification of Kendall Square that's occurring with some leftover factories. I don't even need to show you that. You saw it in the lecture. You can pick out the factories that have turned into biomed incubator spaces. You can see Genzyme and all the other stuff. You can see all that stuff, and you can see old housing, left over from the industrial era. And you see all that. You see the widened streets. You might even see a fragment of subway, of the red line. So all of that becomes available. Now you can start to work the image in a way that allows you, that supports a characterization of relationships. So I'm saying, you're too young, I think, to remember Sesame Street. You all watched Sesame Street. But when you were watching, did they do one of these things that's not like the other? They did. So everyone saw that?
I don't remember because my English wasn't very good at the time.
One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. I won't say it. So what goes together? The sidewalks, that's good for humans. The freeway, not good for humans, not good for humans. It's like there's a wall here. We know it looks open if you're from Mars, but we're not from Mars. We know that this is an impenetrable barrier. And to get from this humanly occupiable space to that one, good luck. They could have, I assume this is an island under here, so this student could have highlighted this space as well. This is somewhere in between. You can walk through here, but watch your back. Right? Sorry. So you get the idea? You can work this image. So I'm going to do it more quickly, and then I'm going to come back, because there's all kinds of things like, I don't know how to use Photoshop, right? You know how much Adobe charges for Photoshop? Okay, we'll get to that. But here's the thing. Well, let me just answer that since I brought it up. It's not crazy isn't Picasa free? iPhoto? What do you use to manage your digital photos? Whatever you use, I bet there's a way to take an image, open the image editing app, and decrease the darkness of the whole thing. Print it out, and grab some different colored highlighter pens. I wish my students previously had done that, because I keep getting these really bad blocky shapes. Like there'll be a big square here that says, see, this. I said, what? What do you mean this? I see a big square. No, what I mean is the building. And my response is, and will be, well, if you mean the building, color the building. When you put a big red circle around this parking lot, the circle interferes with my brain's struggle to project it in there. So this is a key point. You want to match pixel for pixel your color to the actual, factual, physical, experiential reality of the image. Does that make sense? Because you don't want your big red circles to be interfering with the reader's attempt to read. Okay. I'm just going to have to keep this going somehow. So, as you go through the process of working with an image, you should be learning stuff as you go. So,
Beneath the glitz and over-the-top commercialism.
So you're saying one of these things is not like the other. You're saying, okay, what belongs together and what doesn't? This is not a great example. But, so you might color the people, because those bodies are a thing. These are not individuals any longer. This is a cloud of humans. And so you might take a color and capture the volume of bodies as one thing. This is a focal point, so it deserves a different color. Oh, look, you did it. Excellent, thank you, Chris. And so he's walking us through the evidence as he developed it. He doesn't know what he's going to say when he starts to color the image. He chooses the image based on intuition and judge. It's a judgment call. You don't know it's going to be successful because you don't know what it's going to reveal until you start working it. So you start working it. You say, okay, what's the first most important thing? I think it's the castle, Magic Kingdom. Boom. So I color it, and then I scan it, or I take a photo of it with my camera. And then I say, okay, what's the second thing I notice? The second thing that is worthy of pulling out? I say, well, the way this screen is framed. So if I were doing this, I would just try to capture the facades, because they kind of create the walls of the space. And when I'm moving through here, what I'm experiencing is this as an occupiable architectural space. It's a defined urban room. And so these facades are the walls of that room. That's the number two thing. Then there's all these people. Then there might be the ground plane. Then there might be the trees. And so I'm going to highlight the role that the trees and the other street furniture play in terms of punctuating the space. And while I'm doing this, this is an exploration. I'm exploring. I don't know what I'm going to think about this when I'm done. I'm not sure why I'm even coloring these things. But it is a journey of discovery. This is research. You are finding stuff out. And once you get someplace and you've found important things out, what have you found out? What is the most important thing you discovered in this process of analysis? What relevance might it have to other people? So that's what you arrive at the end. So you might be wanting, as you do this, you might just scribble down, take notes, what are you discovering along the way? And then deciding as a separate step, what is the most important thing? What are the most important implications, not just about one of the things you discovered, but maybe, hopefully, about the relationship between things. This as a central focal point, it draws us in, not so different from Killian Court, by the way. What difference does it make how busy these two sidewalls are? Because there's a lot going on. Does that matter? Would this be the same if it didn't have people? So there's no right or wrong answer. There are just more or less interesting evaluations. And so you use your judgment based on who you are, what's important to you, to figure out what is important about this space, what you've discovered about it as you went through the steps of analyzing it. Take that discovery that emerged only at the end, move that to the beginning, and start with it as the first thing you say in your 60-second statement. So you're going to say it?
Beneath the glitz and over-the-top commercialism of Disney's Main Street USA lies an important lesson in urban design.
Okay. B. Minus. Because he just said this is important. Listen, man, you've only got 60 seconds. You better say it. Don't tell us there's something important. Just spit it out. Okay? So that should be the first thing you say. Now, you've got to support that with your words and your pictures. You're not allowed to say anything that you're not showing us. Remember show and tell? There's a reason why it's show and tell and not tell and tell, or even tell and show. Right? It's show and tell. This is still show and tell every week. Show us, then tell us. Showing us is more important than telling us. If you show us clearly with your analysis and what you say is not on target, it's still okay. But if what you show us is not that interesting and you say something that's profound, that's okay. But it's better to show us well and tell us poorly than it is to show us poorly and tell us well. Ideally, the better the thing is you have to show, the easier it is to say it in an interesting way. So it's show and tell. Show us something that's interesting and tell us what we're seeing. Make your biggest point at the beginning and then support it by walking us through the steps of your analysis in a way that supports that big statement you made at the beginning. So let's hear what else he has to say.
Familiar strategies are used here. Small storefronts, vistas that terminate in a major landmark, in this case, the Magic Kingdom, and buildings that meet the requirements of an intimate human scale that is lacking in contemporary urban development.
As a matter of fact, when they designed Disneyland, they made Main Street 2/3 real scale, so people felt more cuddly or something. However, that's not the best word, but to make it feel more intimate.
It is not a coincidence that the formal spatial arrangement of the streets that are being replicated predate automobility. The success of Disney can in part be attributed to the fact that one must leave their car behind before entering the theme park. This nostalgia is not without basis. All people long for a built environment with less cars and more opportunities for navigating by foot.
Okay, questions about this? This is the main part and the hardest part, picking the picture and working with it. Visually, coming up with a narrative argument that is supported by the process of discovery in the picture. So one mistake that some of you will make in the early part of this is you've all done illustrated writing reports. This is not that. It might include that eventually, but first and foremost, this is a visual analysis that is itself the source of what you say. This is not, I'm going to study the history, and I'm going to give examples through history of how it got to here, chronologically through time. This is, in a way, working back from the final result. ultimately, as the semester, because you're going to do this lots of times. You're going to do this many, many times. As a matter of fact, even when we get to the testing part, the quizzes and tests, it's going to be very similar. You're going to be making a point using evidence. You're not just going to be saying, oh, sure, the Burj Khalifa was opened in 2010 with fireworks display. No, you're going to be saying that without the world of sovereign wealth, there could not be any Burj Khalifa, and without understanding sovereign wealth, the Burj Khalifa should not exist. There's no reason for it to exist. Its reason to be is as a target of investment. And so it's taking these things you learn and deploying them in support of some larger point. Questions? TAs? Questions? Suggestions?
How do we come up with what to discuss? So like if we look at a picture and will we be given prompts or some idea as to
Excellent question. The prompts are embedded in the lecture in terms of some clue as to what type of forces we might be interested in. So today's lecture, for example, there was the four systems, I think they're on here. The larger overarching thing is designing for 10 billion people. What do we do? I don't have the individual themes on here, but the lecture sheet, I think, has that. So structured relationships in education at MIT. That's a theme. Financialization. So these are forces. These are big forces. The importance of structuring relationships in education and anything else. Factories, offices, cubicles. Financialization and its impact on the built environment. Buildings that are over 30 stories tall, as suggested in the lecture, 30, 40 stories tall. There's going to be some part of that extra height that is driven by the need to create a symbol for a corporation or a government. And the rest of it, if you're trying to reach beyond what anyone has ever reached before, there's probably some degree of financialization involved, like those island single home resort communities out off the coast of Dubai. It's like that. Informality, huge world of possibility there. How are those forces driving and informing that physical fabric of slums? Humanitarian design, there are examples of disaster relief that you could look at. Don't think there are any in the book, which is why I say look at the secondary, candidates are things mentioned in the lecture, but not a primary example, one of these four. So not one of these four, but the secondary examples are fair game. Things suggested in the book are fair game, and then things out there in the world are fair game. So you're just looking for places that seem ripe or that perplex you or intrigue you. You don't have to know, you don't have to understand. As a matter of fact, it's almost an advantage to not understand the place first. Choose something that mystifies you or intrigues you, and then, and here's part that, to state it positively, the world has become more and more conducive to this, but to state it negatively, not every site gives you a high-resolution image from an elevated point of view. Sorry about that. On behalf of the world, I apologize that not yet. We know We do not yet have, but we're working on it, a way to program drones all over the world to go get a picture for us. It is happening, but it's not happening fast enough. So do an image search. Set your filter to large files. It's. I hear a question. How do you do that? I hate this screen resolution. So name something. Abu Dhabi. Did I hear? Search tools, size. See that? And you can be specific about the size, or you can just say large. I've never done this. Let's try that. And this is kind of the minimum size. Now, you can't filter for elevated viewpoint, but
You can use the word aerial.
ah,
That's often
okay. See how this works? This is a group. Aha. Whoa, beautiful. So I'm looking for human scale experiential in the forefront, in the foreground. Like that's too high up. It distances me from the human scale experience. This is much better. But there's not a lot for me to occupy in this place. And I'm not intrigued. So what intrigues you? And what is interesting? Which one you like?
well, it's not interesting, but when I was in practice, I did a project, if you scroll up a bit, for that piece of land.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, which obviously, it did get made. I don't know when that image was taken.
So here's a good one. And so what's the resolution on this? Looks pretty high. And so I can save the image. And now I can work it. And so I can bring it into something, soften the darkness, print it 6 times, and work it with highlighters. And something should be discoverable. Like, well, first of all, is this real? Oh, I'm so glad I did that. If it's not real, it's not the teacher. The world is the teacher. If it's an architectural rendering, we can critique it, we can poke fun of it, we can make fun of architectural fantasies, but that gets boring after a while. So we reject the architectural fantasies and we go for something like this. Is this real? Look at that! My favorite Dubai pictures. So that's not quite elevated enough. Also, this is more like it. But here's a limitation. It's a little bit too high up, so I can't really get a sense of what's happening beyond. Also, that's an architectural rendering, isn't it? It's not always easy to tell these days. Is it a rendering?
Yeah.
Damn architects. Okay, so so you work it, you scan. Let's say you're using highlighters. How many people are going to use Photoshop or something digital? Oh, okay. But okay, if you're going to use Photoshop or something digital, some advice. Do not use the abstract shapes tools. Use the magnetic lasso or the magic wand. Let's open something. Well, I'm not seeing one that works. But I'm just gonna choose any image. Okay. So do not use the abstract shape tools like that. Instead use shapes like this. Photoshop can be a pain. I actually recommend not doing Photoshop because it's a pain. But if you use the magic wand tool, it'll choose the actual colors. Why?
I think we used to try that.
Okay. Or use the magic wand tool. Or the magnetic lasso. That's just a lasso. Do not use this tool because the edges are so sharp. It doesn't match. It's difficult to match the reality of the place. Instead, use the magnetic lasso tool. But I also don't want you to get hung up with these tools because ultimately they just get in the way. Right? Look how long this has taken me compared with how quickly I would do it if I had a highlighter pen. And I've been using Photoshop for 60 years. Well, no, not that long, but a long time.
So printers around campus are mostly black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay to use a photo that's not in color?
It might actually be an advantage because then you're adding the color and you're saying, I didn't even select any of these gray tones. Everything I selected is the color, so it actually might be an advantage. It might be a strategy. It might not be, though. It might be better to... for some of you, you're just going to use digital tools, and you're going to struggle with it, and it's going to take you 3 times as long as anybody else, but you're going to be developing skills, and that's fine. I don't mind, as long as you don't mind. But just because you're using sophisticated software doesn't mean you get a head start or extra credit for being overly clever. It still has to be good, just like the hand stuff. Hand stuff is easier to get good. So the hardest part, the focus of this, is the visual analysis and the narration that goes with the visual analysis. Beyond that, it'd be great if next week you find a way to put all that into a 60-second video. 42 seconds? No. 73 seconds? No. 60 seconds. Okay? See what it feels like to fill up 60 seconds with an opening statement that is worthy of being the first thing you say, and then a sequenced line of argument that hopefully takes us through your visual analysis and supports your revisiting of that opening statement. And if you can capture that in a 60-second video, upload it to Prezi, place it on the Prezi in relationship to your classmates, like, she wrote about this, mine's totally unrelated, it's over here. Or mine's related, but I took the opposite approach. Or she thought this was important, but I think this is important. So you place it in the Prezi someplace else. And you can move your classmates' screens around also. So logistics-wise, I will send you an email invitation to join a Prezi. Prezi, I think, we'll ask you, did you guys do it? We'll ask you to sign in with an email address. And then you will have editing rights to the Prezi. One of you is going to delete the work of your classmate. Avoid that. But when you do it, just contact your classmate and say, sorry, I deleted your work. Can you put it back up? I'm really sorry, I owe you one. And then just, don't be frightened. Just work it. Make it work. So you will arrive in class next Wednesday having already produced something to show us. And you can either, if you're shy, play your video, or you can perform it live in class next Wednesday. And say, I've been thinking about it since I recorded it. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And improv, hopefully it will be about 60 seconds. If you're not the first person presenting, you may wish to alter the point you make so that it starts to either make a connection or an opposition to that which came before. The idea is you are each coming with something to show and tell, and what happens next, we don't know. You have extremely intelligent and talented TAs who can handle the improvisational nature of these discussions. They are not number one. They are number 4. They are here to facilitate and structure the discussions with your classmates, who, by the way, are number 3. They're more important. Your classmates are more important, than your TAs or me, because you guys are going to have to figure out what to do now. What questions? So you have to be able to convince each other in a way that gets you on the same page, so you know what to do next. Now, do you have questions? Is it doable? I'm throwing so much at you.
You might be opposed to this. Do you think it might be useful to put up a few examples or to make them available?
Yes, let's do that. So as part of the invitation, I will invite you to some examples, or maybe a boatload of examples. As you can tell, by the end of the semester, right, we're going to do this, 10, 11 times. Because, by the way, the term project, I just explained to you what your term project is as well. Just do it again, but now really do it well. It might be longer than 60 seconds. But this is all rehearsal. So you can screw it up several times. Because you're doing so many of them, each one individually is not worth so much of your grade that it really matters. What really matters is mastering this approach to the material and the world as quickly as possible to become as effective as it is possible, so that when you get to the term project and it really matters for the grade, you're successful. And this is all a trick. I am tricking you. I apologize, and you're welcome. This is to trick you into being successful, effective citizens of the world. Good luck. Now, any questions?
Are these presentations in front of the whole class, or in
No, they're in here. Safe space, everyone's friends. You can screw up, and everyone will politely be entertained and not hold it against you, because you're all beautiful people, and you're all friends, and it's okay. We all screw up. Okay? Other questions?
So the term project will be in the form of a video too?
Yes, there will be writing, because we'll get into this more as the semester progresses. The narration works better if you prepare it as a script. The narration actually works best, and you'll do this with the term project, if you write a lot, and then you rewrite it smaller, and then rewrite it smaller, and then it's almost like tweeting. How do you do it in 140 characters? 120 words, 60 seconds, 120 words. How do you do it? It's not easy. It is so much easier to write a 20-page term paper than it is to write a short, effective argument. It won't be 60 seconds, it'll be longer than that. It is so hard to write. But that's what the world demands of us. every day, all day long. Okay? Great. I see a class coming in.